I'm back for whatever that's worth. Um, gonna adjust the sound. It's a commercial, but I have on some lo-fi. Don't want to get it copyright claimed, so I'm gonna turn it down. La vida va muy rápido como para no ponerle corazón. That's obviously not it. Pongamos el corazón a nuestras costumbres y salud a nuestro sabor. Haz de la vida buena. All right. So this is gonna be a fun one. We'll see how this goes. But I wanted to do a live stream talking about martial arts, the history of martial arts. So I have on my channel um, a selection of videos that I've made called Martial Arts Myths. And it's getting cold. Put this on. So I have a selection of videos called Martial Arts Myths that I've been doing for a couple of years. You know, whenever I thought of something. And in it, I debunk a lot of things that are commonly believed in martial arts, right? If that light becomes a problem, I'm going to turn it off. So, but I'm going to put this on first. I guess because I'm close to the window, I'm cold. But, yeah, so in those martial arts myths, I have things about samurai, ninja, karate, kung fu, you name it. Um, so a lot of that verges on historical stuff. So that's what I'm going to tackle. I don't know from where I should start because there's so many martial arts myths out there. And I'm going to try to go through most of them. And, you know, I invite comments as long as they're like rational comments. Any irrational comments, I'm just going to ignore them. What's up, Just Dude? So I don't know. So let's start from the beginning. So the first martial art was wrestling. I know a lot of people have the impression of Asian martial arts being the first, but no. Martial arts dates back to wrestling, all the way back to the first known civilization, the Sumerians. There are actually depictions of them practicing wrestling. And of course, we also see that in ancient Egypt, in Greece, in other parts of the Mediterranean world, as well as in ancient India, the Indus River civilizations, and then later in China as well, along the Yellow and Yangtze River. And it just do says wrestling is also probably the most useful to know, oddly enough. Probably so. I mean, it's just so the thing is, you know, human men, and this is not to be sexist or anything, but no, I want to be very specific. Human men have evolved to fight each other, and the most effective way of them doing so has been through grappling. And this comes from a striker. So I know a lot of people give me flack about always making fun of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in some of my past videos and shorts. But that doesn't mean I'm against grappling. I'm just against the hype that surrounds BJJ. I'm going to get into that as well. So, yeah, so wrestling is the first martial art. And the second one to come along, obviously, was boxing. Now, not boxing in the way we know it today under the current rules. What they would have considered boxing is what today we would call like dirty boxing. So, in any case, Um, that was the first martial art, wrestling. So a lot of people want to, debate that sort of stuff, but started off wrestling. And, you know, another thing is um, a lot of these fighting arts did not start off as like some super secret techniques by these ancient militaries to be effective on the battlefield. A lot of these martial arts start off as just games played between people. Wrestling started out as such. Wrestling, and I don't know, I can't give receipts on how wrestling started in ancient Samaria, the first known civilization. But in many parts of the world, in many parts of the world, wrestling usually started off as just as a game, right? Boxing, probably the same thing. Probably start off as a game, not as something used as for militaristic purposes. Um, where we go from here? Um, so again, like I said, wrestling was the first martial art. It goes all the way back to ancient Samaria and the other Mesopotamian civilizations, and throughout, and then to other parts of the Mediterranean world like Egypt, Greece, Rome. um, we see it in ancient India, ancient China, and throughout the world. And every like pre-modern civiliz every pre-modern civilization has some form of wrestling or or pugilism because boxing came along not too long after wrestling. As far as in like so, I guess we can talk about Asian martial arts. There's a lot of myths about Asian martial arts. Um, so the story of kung fu that's usually told to people is that there was a Indian Buddhist monk Bodhidharma who brought some Indian exercises over to China, to which he taught them to the Shaolin monks so that they could stay awake and do their meditative exercises. Shaolin usually practiced like Chan Buddhism, which became known as Zen Buddhism, Chan Buddhism, right? And apparently they were taught these militaristic exercises, um, which became Shaolin Kung Fu. That's probably all bullshit. I'm just gonna say it. Did Was there a monk named both Bodhidharma that brought Indian martial arts to China, which became Shaolin Kung Fu? I don't know, but I really doubt it. I really doubt it because there were already martial arts that existed in China prior to Shaolin Kung Fu. So that's so I'm gonna automatically say the whole myth of Shaolin being the the beginning of Chinese martial arts or Asian martial arts in general is just bullshit. Chinese already had martial arts before Shaolin Kung Fu arose. Most you had like things like Chinese wrestling, China, and you had things like Mongolian wrestling, and a lot of the so-called internal kung fu styles are grappling styles. So that's another thing. So in kung fu, there's this division between external kung fu and an internal kung fu. External kung fu is supposed to be like your hard striking styles, the tiger style, and all that sort of stuff. Whereas the internal style is supposed to be like more focusing on using your chi That's all bullshit. That's bullshit. The, the difference between the internal kung fu styles and external kung fu styles was basically the external styles concentrated on striking skills, and the internal skills dealt with grappling. That's the difference. Also, Shaolin was not some especially effective style which helped them fight against imperial warlords. Um, Most of the time, like the Shaolin temples were funded by the dynastic rulers, obviously, or they would have been obliterated. Then there's another thing saying, oh, well, all the Shaolin temples were actually obliterated, and what's being practiced today isn't pure Shaolin kung fu. That's bullshit too. Look, that's just not true. Has Shaolin changed? Yes, it has. But I mean, for something to have been around for maybe I'm gonna say at least 1,000 or so years, there's gonna be some changes, especially in light of the 21st century. In any case, it wasn't so super effective because the Shaolin used it to fight against their imperial overlords, like some sort of Robin Hood for Robin Hood versus Prince John. That wasn't true. More than likely, these temples were funded by these warlords, and if the warlords had a problem with them, they would have just completely shut those temples down, if not just outright massacred all of them. And then there's the other myth that the Shaolin was so effective that the dynastic rulers actually called upon the Shaolin to fight against the Europeans in a Boxer rebellion. No, that didn't happen. Was there a Boxer rebellion? Yes, and they got their hand they got their asses handed to them. You got a bunch of people fighting either barehanded or with staffs and spears and knives against people who are armed with guns. It didn't go that well for them. So that whole myth that the Shaolin fought valiantly against these European colonial powers, the British, and you know, which you know went into the whole Opium War and all that sort of stuff. That's BS. Yes, they did try to fight them, but they got their asses handed to them. Duh. Like, whom do you know fighting barehanded against people with guns has that? How? When has that ever gone well? When has that ever gone well? Not very much. Just due says most origin stories are largely made up and maybe low truth to it. Eh, the, a lot of martial arts are made up to sell martial arts. That's the problem, just the dude, is that a lot of these martial arts teachers make up these stories to sell their martial art to students. So if you tell everyone Shaolin is the foundation of all Asian martial arts, that's gonna make people want to go learn it, even though it's not. there were there were martial arts practice in India, and there was martial arts practice in China before the rise of Shaolin Kung Fu. So, um, Mona says, didn't the Europeans get gunpowder from them? Uh, I mean, yes and no. I mean, who they were the first. They were probably the first people to use it in like in fireworks and stuff like that. What's up, Agatha? They were like the first people to use it in like fireworks and explosives stuff like that. But the it was the Europeans who developed them as effective firearms. There's a whole book on this by J.A.C. Diamond called Guns, Germs, and Steel: How the West Won the World, like how the West conquered the world. Guns, germs, and steel. The West had the West. The Europeans had the guns. They conquered the world. Not to mention, they brought their germs to other parts of the world where the people didn't have a natural immunity to those diseases, and still referring to they were more technologically advanced. So that's why the book is called Gun Germs and Steel. It gives a biogeographical account of how the West conquered the world. So yes, where gunpowder did develop over in East Asia first, they didn't develop it into the types of guns and rifles that developed in Europe first. They had some rudimentary things like firecrackers. I mean, sorry, like fireworks and explosives and stuff like that. But no, all the effective machinery was in the West, and this was because of the Silk Road. Like there was a huge exchange of information, ideas, and technology across the Silk Road, across going across Eurasia. Just due says I think the technology evolved separately in both places. That I might be wrong, but yeah, I mean, so like I said, information, ideas, and technology were shared along the Silk Road throughout Eurasia. This is why Eurasia became more advanced than other parts of the world, like Africa and the North and South Americas. Okay. Like I said, I recommend the book. It's called Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. Great book to read. Um, what else? So, again, another thing, these Kung Fu masters, you know, they lie about stuff as far as, again, the whole thing with internal Kung Fu being this, uh, um, this thing dealing with chi energy and all that was just like I said again. That's just bullshit. The internal styles were just more heavily into grappling, whereas the external styles more heavily into striking. And you will also see a division between parts of the northern provinces and the southern provinces, where the northern provinces had more had more developed kicking because they were in more mountainous regions where they had developed more leg strength. Um, what else? Um, so many, there's so many of these to tackle. So, guys, if you have suggestions or claims that you want to ask me about, go ahead and ask me because I might forget some of these because there's so many. Here's another one: karate. So, karate isn't a pure Japanese style. It was a hybrid style. It's like probably one of the earliest hybrid martial arts. Um, Although the very first one came out of Greece, Pancratian. Pancratian was like an Olympic event that blended wrestling and boxing. Um, and again, this was often used or practiced for the purpose of Olympics. It wasn't for for Greek you know Greek city states to practice militaristic arts or whatever. It might have ended up being practiced by some of their soldiers for the purposes of either fitness or maybe fight close quarters fighting. But Pancration, which was a blend of boxing and and Greco wrestling, was an Olympic event in ancient Greece. That was probably the first known hybrid martial arts, and probably like the the most ancient forerunner to MMA was Pancration. But then skip a skip some centuries ahead, and you have karate. Now, karate was brought to Okinawa, which at the time was the Rikyu kingdom, um, from people from China in the Fujian province. They apparently brought some style of kung fu, I think like a crane style from Fujian province, which became one of the core elements of what became Okinawan karate. And it even shows in the name. The original karate was originally translated to mean the Chinese hand, not empty hand. It first meant Chinese hand. It became the empty hand because when it went to mainland Japan, the imperial Japanese didn't like that term, so the Okinawan teachers changed karate to mean the empty hand, but karate meant the Chinese hand, and originally it was just called te, and it was a bunch of techniques taken from the Fujian province of China, as well as some elements taken from the Philippines, because at the time the Rikyu Kingdom was sort of um, a trading hub amongst different parts of East Asia at the time. There was even elements brought from the Siamese kingdom. So Okinawan karate became a blend of this uh, of a bit of like uh, southern kung fu, uh, Filipino martial arts, particularly the weapons. Most of the most of the Japanese weapons in karate, which became a separate. They were all part of one martial art, but in modern karate, it's called kabuto now. Kabuto was all the weapons that used to be trained in Okinawan karate, like the tonfa, the sai, the staff. There's a long uh, boat paddle, which is used like a weapon. Um, there's short sticks, which is called the Joe. All of these. Then, like I said, there was elements brought in from the Siamese kingdom, from Siamese boxing, which was the forerunner of Muay Thai. Um, these became karate. So karate was a complete martial art in its beginnings. Um, there was weapons, there was grappling, there was weight training. They used like some kettlebells to train. They ran, of course. Um, and but the lie. So here's where the lies about karate come in. There's these lies that karate was developed by these Okinawan farmers to fight against the Japanese samurai. That's just complete bullshit. First of all, and if you were a farmer, you were up from sun up to sundown. You were working the field. When would a farmer have had 3 or 4, like 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours a day to waste time practicing karate? That's just bullshit. Two, a farm those weapons did not develop from farming tools like is often taught in karate schools. They were they were weapons brought over from the Philippines. The nunchaku, that is a Philippine weapon. Matter of fact, when Bruce Lee learned the nunchaku, he learned it from his Filipino friend and student Dan Inosanto. That's where he learned the nunchaku from. He did not learn it from karate. He did not learn it from Wing Chun Kung Fu or anything like that. He learned Philippine martial arts from his Philippine friend whom he made his head instructor of his school, who is who is his top student, Dan Inosanto. He learned that. He learned how to use the eskrima sticks, which you've seen him do in movies too, using the eskrima sticks. Um, but more on that later. So that's where you get the weapons that become kabuto from the Philippines, and the kicking you see in Okinawan karate, usually low leg, like kicks, no, that are below the waist, very practical. Like if you've seen the original Karate Kid, not Cobra Kai, not that bullshit. Although the last season ended well, I'll say that. But anyway, The original Karate Kid movie showed what Goju Ryu karate looks like. Goju Ryu karate is a form of Okinawan karate, and it's very practical. And like I said, this was not developed by Okinawan farmers to fight against Japanese samurai. That's just complete bullshit. Farmers would not have had time to to develop and practice karate when they would have been spending the whole day in the field, work in the fields. That's just BS. Karate was developed by Okinawan noblemen of the Ryukyu kingdom. Okay, it was their it was their Okinawan royalty that developed karate. Okay, and they didn't develop it to fight against the Japanese. That would have just been insane. Like Japanese samurai against a bunch of Okinawan noblemen. Yeah, that wouldn't have happened. And besides that, if it were that effective, the samurai would have learned it, but they didn't. The samurai had their own martial arts, which became classical jujitsu and kendo and aido and kyudo. Kyudo is the classical Japanese archery. Kendo is the Japanese Japanese fencing style, and aido is the art of the drawing the sword. And of course, was classical jiu-jitsu was a complete martial art like karate. It had grappling, it had striking, it had takedowns and throws and submissions, and it blended with their use of weapons that samurai would have learned for like close quarters and melee fighting. So if karate was so superior to what the Japanese were doing, they would have wanted to learn it much earlier than when they did. But karate didn't really cross over to mainland China to like the late 19th century, early 20th century. And some of the things in karate is just bullshit. Like, first of all, they weren't doing horse stances so they could learn how to punch people while on a horse, or that's just BS. And they weren't practicing these reverse punches so they could punch through the samurai's armor. That's just bullshit. That no, that's just not true. The moment said I was just about to ask where jujitsu originated and the nunchaku, but you just said it. Yeah, jujitsu developed as a form of close quarter fighting amongst the samurai and their foot soldiers called the ashigaru. Um, Nunchakus were Filipino weapons, which was brought over to Japan, as was things like the tonfa, the sai, and other similar similar weapons. So no, karate was not developed by Okinawan farmers to fight against to fight against the Japanese samurai. That was just BS. It was developed by a bunch of by a bunch of wealthy noblemen in the Okinawan kingdom, which was known as the Rikyu kingdoms, uh, island kingdom at the time. Okay, uh, and then it came over to mainland China during the imperial era of Japan. Um, these Okinawan teachers willingly brought it over. Gichin Fumikashi is considered the founder of modern karate because he brought over what became Shotokan karate, which is the most popular form of karate, Shotokan karate. He brought that over to mainland Japan and taught many people like in the military and stuff like that. But again, this was not karate like other martial arts, did not develop as a style to fight against soldiers. It just simply didn't. Melissa, that's cool as I didn't know. Agnes says, is martial arts originally Chinese or Japanese? You came into this. You came into this late. Um, Martial arts is every every country has its own martial arts. Every civilization has its own martial art. Martial arts has been around since ancient civilization. It started in Sumeria. Wrestling was the first known martial art, and we see records of it from ancient Sumeria. We also see it in other Mesopotamian civilizations. We also see it in ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, ancient India, ancient China. Martial arts does not martial arts is not just Asian. That's what I want people to understand. Martial arts is every civilization has developed martial arts, and it's usually developed as a game amongst men to stay to work out their aggression. Um, here's a nugget that you guys. I'm getting ahead of myself, but here's a historical nugget that a lot of people don't know. Um, Black Americans, foundational Black Americans, developed their own martial art in this in the American South during the times of slavery. It's called knocking and kicking, where it, it was basically like a game amongst them where they use headbutts, punches, and kicks. It's called knocking and kicking. Look it up. It developed in the Carolinas of the American South during the somewhere around the 1800s or 1700s, 1700s to 1800s, brought over by the African slaves to the American South. So every civilization has practiced martial arts because again, all human men have evolved to fight. Like our when you look at the anatomy and physiology of human men, our musculature, our physiology is all based on the ability is based on us being able to fight other men. This is why we this is why we look as we look. At least the ones of us who are physically fit. We look the way we look because our bodies were developed, evolved to fight other humans, other human men. So in every human civilization, there has arose a martial art. Europe too. In Europe, they call it historically European martial arts or HEMA. She said, "Never. Thanks for the information. No problem." So, anyway, getting back to where I was. So, a lot of BS goes into karate. Um, Again, sometimes it's overplayed its connection to kung fu. There is a connection, but it's only a particular part of China from where it developed, which is the Fujian province in southern China, where there was a, I think, white crane style or something like that, from which karate originally developed, and then was further developed in Okinawa amongst these ancient masters who mixed in elements of Filipino martial arts and Siamese boxing. Um, and then it got further refined when Gichin Funakashi took Okinawan karate to mainland China and developed what became Shotokan karate. It further developed because Gichin Funakashi's son studied Savat, which is French kickboxing, and he blended French kickboxing into modern karate, which is why modern karate and Okinawan karate don't look the same. Modern karate has a lot of flashy high kicks, spin kicks, and jump kicks, which you don't see in Okinawan karate, which is why you can tell a difference between Okinawan karate and Karate Kid and what Cobra Kai does. Cobra Kai practices Tang Sudo, which is a type of Korean karate based on Shotokan karate brought to Korea. Okay, and then mixed with the Korean martial arts like like Takion. and Chinese kung fu. But um, modern karate again separated from Okinawan karate because one, again, they changed the name to make karate mean the empty hand instead of the Chinese hand, which it originally meant. Gichin Funikashi's son added the kicking style of Savat into modern karate to make it so that Japanese karate could compete with Western boxing for effectiveness. So they added those all the kicking and stuff that you see in Savat into Shotokan karate. Also, because again, mainland Japan already had its own martial arts with kendo and jujitsu. They took the grappling techniques out of modern karate. So modern karate no longer has grappling in it, although you still will see a couple. Um, Sometimes you'll see some throws still in it, but usually Okinawan karate you'll still see throws and takedowns, but most modern karate is just pure striking. They also took the weapons out of modern karate, and that became a separate art called kobudo. And again, those kobudo weapons were mostly weapons from the Philippines. Um, what else? And like I said, karate was not developed for peasants to fight against the Japanese samurai. That's just bullshit. Okinawan karate started off as a pastime amongst wealthy Okinawan noblemen. Uh, where do we go from here? Oh, so while we're on samurai, let's defeat some historical BS about samurai. There were no female samurai. I don't care how many times you guys hear it. They say that there was a class of female samurai called the Onabogeisha. That's bullshit. There was some people called the Unamusha, but they were not female samurai. These were typically the wives and daughters of samurai, and they were taught martial arts. One of the weapons they used was the naginata, which was like a long, it was like a, it was like a pole arm or a halberd, which is a long staff with a blade at the end, right? They will often use these and taught to practice these to protect the household when the men were away at war. They were not female samurai. That's just not true. Okay, that's just bullshit. The whole female samurai is just BS. It's some feminist revisionism of Japanese history. Jap Japanese culture is the most gendered. Japanese culture is one of the most gendered divisions of any culture I've ever seen. So to think that they would be have unisex militaries is just bullshit. That's no, that's just BS. There's only and amongst the Unamusha, there's only one historical example of one of them actually fighting on a battlefield, and even that account of that woman, I can't remember her name, but even that one account has been disputed. But for the most part, there's no female samurai. There were women who were trained in classical Japanese martial arts known as the Onamusha, but the Onamusha were mostly the wives and daughters of samurai men who were taught martial arts to protect the household, which makes sense. So that's one thing. Oh, the second thing is Bushido is bullshit. There was no samurai code called Bushido. I know a lot of people, especially a lot of martial artists, are going to be like, yes, it was. Listen, did the Japanese have a code of conduct? Yes. Was it Bushido? No. Bushido was a concept developed by a Japanese man who was raised and educated in Japan, came back to Japan, and wrote a book in which he based a Japanese code of ethics from medieval Europe's code of chivalry, and then just made a Japanese version of it. And then this was taken by the Imperial Japanese government and made propaganda for its military. That's how Bushido came to be. It was not a code of honor among samurai. That was just BS. Bushido was not a thing in feudal Japan. It literally came about in the early 20th century by some European raised Japanese guy. So the irony. Uh, which leads to my the third debunking, which is ninja. There were no ninja. There were no ninja. That's just BS. Now, when I say there's no ninja, I always get so much flack about this. When I say there's no ninja, I'm not saying there weren't. What I am not saying, I'm not saying there weren't Japanese assassins and spies. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying there was no separate elite clan that secretly did these missions of espionage and assassinations for the for either the imperial government or the shogunate. That was not true. What is the case is the Japanese the assassins and spies, they were just samurai or their foot soldiers, the ashigaru, who went out and did these things. Because again, it feeds into the myth of Bushido that because of the code of Bushido that assassination and espionage and intelligence gathering would be beneath what a samurai would do. No, it wasn't. The samurai did whatever was called upon them by their daimyo, which is their lord. Like whatever the daimyo asked of the samurai, they did, and their foot soldiers, the ashigaru. There was no, and then not only that, these these rulers wouldn't have trusted people outside of the people they could actually control to carry out these sorts of operations for them. They wanted people they could control to do that for them. So did they sometimes hire outside people? Yes. Was there was there a secret clan of these people that were that were at the behest of of the Japanese government? No, not really, because they didn't trust people outside of their control. So yes, there were mercenaries around, but they mercenaries weren't very often trusted. Nor were these. Then people might say, well, what about those ascetic warriors, those little mountain ascetics, who often did like maybe some classical martial arts and spiritual exercises? Yes, they existed. There was actually a sect of Buddhist monks that were warrior monks, and sometimes they were hired by the Japanese government because but these warrior monks weren't ninja. They weren't ninja. They already had their own name. Uh, I forgot the name of them at this very instant, but they had a name. They weren't ninja. They weren't they weren't walking around in secret clothing to hide their identity and all that sort of stuff. These warrior monks sometimes worked alongside the government, sometimes worked against the government, depending on their interests. Melissa, do you think Ninja BS started from Ronins who tried to avenge the master's death? They were still samurai. No. First of all, ninja is a Chinese word, so it wasn't even a word that would have been used at the time. Some people claim, well, oh yeah, well, that's because back then they would have called them the shinobi no jutsu, what they practice. Is again, bit of fancifulness. The fact of the matter is, the whole ninja uniform came from came from Japanese theater, kabuki theater. The all black was what the 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 uh, the stage hands would wear in kabuki theater to show that you're not supposed to be seeing them. So in kabuki theater, they will wear these all black outfits to show that they were supposed to be invisible to the audience. You're supposed to like just pay attention to the actors and not to the stage hands who would be dressed in all black. And also the swords and all the other stuff they became characteristics of them came from Japanese fighting movies, um, the samurai movies, which were called the Jedi movies, which is where George Lucas got the name Jedi from the Jedi um, samurai films from this from like the 60s. Like the earliest ver- mentions of like ninjas and stuff was like in that James Bond movie back in what I think 1964 or 19 whatever it was. And like I said, the outfits come from kabuki stagehands. Again, as far as espionage, intelligence gathering, assassinations, those were all carried out by samurai. He said, "I'm sorry, you just made me think of the movie Three Ninjas." Man, that movie sucked. Those movies sucked. That whole franchise sucked. I remember watching it as a kid thinking they're gonna be good. Those movies suck. Even at 13, I knew those movies suck. That's bad when you're 13 and you're like, this movie sucks. But yeah. Anyway, um, but yeah, so the samurai are great in comic books and in video games and in anime, but they didn't really exist. Like I said, if you want to call the samurai who carried out these sorts of operations ninja, you can, but I find it kind of redundant to say samurai who carried out these less than nice operations to be ninja. The fact is, like I said, ninja did whatever they were called to do by their daimios. So if their daimyo wanted them to go out and unalive someone, they did. If they wanted them to go out and go spy on other people within their within their vicinity, they did. If they needed them to go collect information on people, they did. Like that was not beneath the 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 behavior of a samurai because again, Bushido was not a real thing. Bushido was literally made up by some Japanese guy who came out of Europe and made up made a book up about the code of chivalry, but made for Japanese people and called it Bushido. And then the imperial, the, and then the imperial era of Japan then propagated his book for military propaganda. So, um, what else? There's a lot of stuff with samurai. Oh, here's one. The whole black samurai. Look, there was an African slave brought over and who was then given the title of a samurai, but there's no history of him actually ever being trained and fighting as a samurai, which is what pissed so many people off with that video game. I forgot which the name of the video game. So I'm not a gamer, guys. But I understand why people were so mad about that video game, talking about this fake black samurai. Because yes, the guy really did exist. Yes, there's evidence that this guy actually existed, but there's no evidence that he actually was ever trained and fought as a samurai. He was just not Afro samurai. That's no. I'm talking about what is the guy's name? Yeah, Afro Samurai was not based on him, but no, he was given a samurai title, but by by the Lord Nobunaga at the time, Odu Nobunaga. But there's no historical evidence that he was trained and fought as a samurai. Like you can be given a title, it would be the same. Like so, if someone, it would be like someone coming over and coming over to Britain and receiving a knighthood from the king. Yes, they're given the title of knight, but that doesn't mean they actually fought and trained as a freaking knight of any of any like British order. It's just it's just a it was just a ceremonial thing given to the person. So there's no history to that guy. I cannot remember his name for the life of me. It sucks that I can't remember the guy's name. Um, no, it's not the Ghost of Tsushima. That's the only samurai game I know. No, there's one that came out last year, but it's a sequel of a video. It's not the first of that video game. It's like a sequel to it or something. Um, but you know, the Chad Boseman was going to play him in a movie. They had wrote the role just for him, and when he passed away, they decided not to continue making the movie because that role was specifically made for Chad Boseman. So unfortunately, we won't get the live action version of that movie, which would have probably been mostly fictional anyway. So samurai use ranged weapons whenever possible. They could fight you without you ever getting close. They would. Oh, thank you. That brings up another myth. That brings up another myth just to do. Thank you. But I'll drink some water in a second. But anyway, so what is that guy's name? No one, no one can. Can someone Google the name of the Black Samurai, please? I don't have my computer on, and my other phone is in charge. I think it's probably dead because it hasn't charged in a few days. So that older phone might be done because it hasn't charged yet, and I can't charge it through the port. The charging port has been broken for like years because I dropped it a few times and it broke the port while the charger was in it. So in any case, the whole Black Samurai thing, Yasuke. Yes, thank you. That's it, my friend Yasuke. So Yasuke was not Yasuke. Yes, thanks, Agatha. Oh, for those that don't know, in Japanese, often you don't pronounce the U in those words. So anyway, so yeah, Yasuke was this African slave brought over, I think, by some Portuguese merchants, and he became apparently liked by the Lord Odu Nobunaga, who ended up um, bestowing upon him a samurai title and I think land, but there's no history of him being trained or fighting as an actual like feudal samurai. Um, so that's another bullshit historic martial arts myth. Another one is, as just a dude hinted, so there's a lot of things. I love my katana, and apparently so did that girl who's never reappeared on my live stream because Moonlit said something about her talking about my sword. But as much as I love my katana, feudal samurai did not rely too heavily on that sword. Actually, the sword didn't become that important until the Meiji era. The Meiji era was actually the end of feudal Japan. In the Meiji era, only samurai and other types of samurai uh, and other sorts of Japanese nobles were allowed to carry a sword on them, and to carry the sword was to show that they were of nobility. Um, but in but in battle, they preferred ranged weapons. They often relied archery was the main tool of samurai. By the time you had to draw a sword, you are usually at a very bad you were at a bad way when it once you had to actually rely on your sword, whether it was the katana or the wazakashi or the tanto, and they would wear it, and they will always. And then, like I said, around the Meiji era, when it became important to wear a sword to show your nobility, your noble, your it was basically a way of showing your your, your social station. It was typically worn with two swords at a time. A daisho, this with the daisho was a long sword and a short sword. So you would have the katana and the wasakashi, or a katana and a tanto. And a tanto was sort of between the length of a short sword and a dagger, but it was usually a wasakashi, because what will happen is you would come to someone's uh, you would come to someone's home or a temple or whatever, and you will leave your katana outside, like it was considered uncivil to bring a long sword in. Plus, a long sword would be too would be too long to fight with indoors. Pause. uh, so they would prefer the wazakashi to to keep on their person when they came inside, because it's a short sword, so it could be used in close quarters, whereas the katana couldn't really be used in close quarters inside a building. So they would wear two swords, and the long sword would be kept outside when they walked in somewhere, and kept the short sword on them, either the wasakashi or the tanto. So, um, in any case, that was the other myth. And like I said, the whole thing about ninja is BS. Another another reason, another martial art history that leads into the ninja myth is the whole so-called thing with the Iga Mountain and Koga Mountain ninja warriors who fought against the the imperial the imperial army. Were there a bunch of people from the Iga and Koga Mountains that fought against the Japanese shogunate and imperial government? Yes, there was. That's historical. But they weren't ninja. They were jizamurai. Jizamurai is a it was a term for it basically just meant country bumpkin samurai. They were of a lower station than the samurai who were a part of either the imperial military or the shogun military. And if people don't, and just separate that also, yes. So there was there was the imperial government, and there was the shogunate. Throughout throughout different eras of feudal Japan, the shogunate had more power than the actual emperor, but they kept the emperor in power basically as a puppet. Um, I think like in the Edo period. And then in any case, the people of the Iga and Koga Mountains were mostly Jizamurai, which are basically, it means rural samurai or country bumpkin samurai, however you want to interpret that. So they were of a lower social class than imperial and shogun samurai. Okay, and they fought alongside the mountain peasants against the imperial government, and they lost. But they were not ninja. But that fed also into the myth that they were ninja. Also, the so-called modern day ninja that are around today, like the so-called Bonjenken people like Dr. Matsaki Hatsumi or Stephen K. Hayes, these are frauds. These guys are frauds. They claim to have documents showing that Dr. Matsaki Hatsumi is the 34th Grandmaster of Togakure Ryu Ninjutsu. If he was the 34th Soke is Japanese for Grandmaster. If he was the 34th Soke or Grandmaster of Togakure Ryu Ninjutsu, that would extend his martial art. That would make his Bunjinken bullshit um, dojo older than most classical martial arts in Japan. 34th Grandmaster. But he has no, and he claims he has documents, but he's not willing to publicly have them publicly verified. So it's bullshit. Likewise, there's another guy calling himself a modern day ninja. I forgot his name, but he's been showed many times on the PBS Japanese news channel. Um, forgot his name, but again, he also has documents which he's unwilling to have publicly verified. So, being that neither one of these grandmasters will public, and again, they're not asking these guys to show like their secret documents on their training and all that sort of stuff or their principles. They just want them to produce the documents showing the his the these the their martial art extends all the way into feudal era, the feudal history of Japan, and they're unwilling to have those publicly verified. So they're frauds. Because I know at some point someone might bring this up. Either, they might be watching this on replay, or people might be currently watching this now and be like, well, what about the guy, Dr. Matsuki Hatsumi, and his student, Stephen K. Hayes? Because they wrote a bunch of books in the 80s and 90s on ninjutsu, which is all bullshit. And then it was another guy who was even worse. There was a guy named Ashita Kim. You find out Ashita Kim was not even Asian. He was a white American man who changed his name to Ashita Kim to and pretended to be a Japanese martial artist who practiced ninjutsu. There was people got away with so much bullshit in the 80s in martial arts because there was no, it was harder to fact check stuff back then than it is now with the rise of the internet and ability to cross check references and it. But even back then, people knew Ashita Kim was bullshit. Like he's a whole white guy pretending to be an Asian man who knows ninjutsu. Oh, Frank Dukes, he's another fraud. Anyone ever watch Bloodsport? I love Bloodsport. That's one of my favorite movies with Jean Claude Van Damme. He played the guy Frank Dukes who supposedly went to the Kumite. Everything about that was bullshit. First of all, and his it was based on a book that Frank Dukes wrote, and in the book, the Kumite wasn't in Hong Kong; it was in the Caribbean, and he pretended to be like this military guy who was like special ops and all this sort of stuff. There, there's no even history that the dude even did had, had that the dude's military service was even overseas. Like, come on. Frank Dukes was a prodigious liar. Did I say that right? Prodigious. He was a liar, and he did some fight for sorry fight choreography for Bloodsport and a few other Jean Claude Van Damme movies. But the dude has been shown to be um, delusional and a liar. Frank Dukes was no martial arts master. He definitely wasn't a ninja, as claimed in the movie. And he definitely didn't make these all these world shattering fighting records. Like, if you ever watch the end of Bloodsport and see all the records he supposedly made uh, and throughout his fighting career, anyone who's ever fought or just knows math knows that some of the stuff he was saying is just bullshit. Like just from you don't even have to know martial arts or had a fighting career. Just looking at the math, it doesn't add up. Some of the stuff he claimed in at the end of Bloodsport. Again, I still love the movie because of Van Damme. Because Van Damme has legit um, legit athletic talent that can't be denied. And Van Damme himself once fought in full contact karate and in kickboxing. But I love Bloodsport. Even Frank Dukes cannot destroy the movie for me. It took it down a peg, knowing that that wasn't a true story. But when I first watched the movie when I was a little kid, I didn't know it was based on a true story anyway. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I read, that I started reading the captions. I was like, oh, this is based on a true story, which made it better for me. And then I became, then, then as an older teenager, young man, I realized, oh, this is all bullshit. So, but yeah, Frank Dukes is a liar. He was not a ninja master. He wasn't even a real martial artist. His military service doesn't show that he was ever like stationed overseas. There's no record of him fighting in any kumite in the Caribbean, much less Hong Kong, as in the movie. And he didn't shatter any fighting records. Monla says, I like Ong Bak too. If you touch on that style and Jet Li knows like four styles, I believe. Jet Li does wushu. Jet Li himself, I'm gonna get into that in a second. Ong Bak, that's not Muay. He I love Tony Jaa, but what he's doing isn't really Muay Thai. He's doing Muay Baran, which is like it's like it's like traditional Thai martial arts because all that flowery stuff is not done in Muay Thai. You don't have to you don't need to know how to do flips and all that sort of stuff in Muay Thai. All that acrobatic stuff is not prerequisites in Muay Thai. The only time you ever see anyone doing a flip is now everyone wants to do the Sanchai cartwheel kick. Because Sanchai made it famous, now a lot of people are practicing the Sanchai cartwheel kick. But outside of the Sanchai cartwheel kick, you do not see people running up on people and elbowing them on the top of their head, like running up. That's something that comes from Muay Baran, which is a more flowery traditional style of Thailand. Everywhere in Southeast Asia where there's a kickboxing style, there's also a traditional style that goes with it. So just like in Burma, there's Burmese boxing, which is called Lethwei, but there's also the traditional martial art, which is called Bando, and some people get them confused. They think Bando and Lethwei are the same thing. They're not. They're different. Same thing in Cambodia. There's a kickboxing style called Kon Khmer, and there's a traditional martial art there as well. They're not the same. And Ong Bak Tony Jaa blends traditional Thai martial arts, and also I think he studied Hapkido. So Tony Jaa is not doing like Muay Thai, pure Muay Thai. The only like if you want to see an actor doing actual Muay Thai in a movie, Bukal does just straight Muay Thai in his movies. Well, I've only seen Bukal in one movie, but he's doing Muay Thai. Bukal. Tony Jaa is not a actual was not a competitive Thai boxer. As far as Jet Li does wushu. Jackie Chan does wushu, um, as well as I think he trained and whatever else he learned when he was in the Peking theater as a kid. They Jackie Chan and his friends um, learned in the Peking theater. They learned wushu and acrobatics. Um, and Jet Li even said about what he learned. He said it's basically like dancing. It's like it's wushu is like dancing. It's not fighting. Wushu is not meant to be fighting. Wushu developed during the um, Mao's well, when Mao took over took over China, uh, he outlawed martial arts, but because he loved Chinese martial arts so much, he didn't want them to all go away. So he had some of these guys come in and develop wushu, but wushu took all the fighting elements out of the martial art. That's what wushu is. It's basically like a defanged. It's a defined Chinese martial art. If you want to learn a Chinese martial art that's actually effective, you take Sanda. Sanda is Chinese kickboxing, which was developed uh, for the Chinese military, taking elements of kung fu and Muay Thai and boxing and wrestling. Because in Sanda, unlike Muay Thai, you can go to the ground. Muay Thai, you're not allowed to go to the ground. Um, Just due to all martial arts movies are a bit silly, but I miss that genre. You don't see it much anymore. Yeah, the old black belt theater of the 80s and 90s, that's gone. Watching those old movies from the 70s and 80s, watching Kung Fu Theater every Saturday afternoon, that's gone. The martial arts genre hasn't fully disappeared. You still have what's called wuxia. Wuxia is I think I'm pronouncing it right. Wuxia is W U, one word, separate word, XIA. Wuxia. It's like martial arts and magic. So a perfect example is uh, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. That's a wuxia film. Um, House of the Flying Daggers, Curse of the Golden Flower. Those sorts of movies. Those are wuxia films. They haven't completely gone away, but there are less of them. And the era of the golden era of Hong Kong movies has kind of gone away, like through the, the the two, I think the two rival studios back then was Golden Harvest, which Bruce Lee did his films under Golden Harvest, and even became an executive producer before he died for Golden Harvest under Raymond Chow. And its rival was the Shaw Brothers. The Shaw Brothers actually tried to hire Bruce Lee. Um, so Raymond Chow made him an offer to become a producer to keep him there at Golden Harvest. But the Shaw Brothers wanted Bruce Lee, and the Shaw Brothers probably has the largest like library of just classic kung fu films. And in Japan, you had a bunch of good martial arts films too. You had all the samurai revenge films, the Jedi films that I mentioned earlier. You had the Jedi films, of which in, influenced George Lucas in his creation of Star Wars. Star Wars was based on a samurai revenge film called The Hidden Fortress. The original Star Wars was loosely based on The Hidden Fortress. Darth Vader's uniform was based on that of a samurai, right? Then of course there was the sci-fi stuff that came from like his influences from Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, Star Trek, and the West and the sprawling desert. Um, of course, came from Western films, particularly the Italian spaghetti, the what they call it, the spaghetti westerns. Those influenced Star Wars. Well, anyway, getting back to martial arts history. So yes, wushu is not was not meant to be like a fighting martial art. It was like operatic. It was you know, and Jet Li himself has said that in an interview that wushu is sort of like a theatrical sort of thing. It's not meant to be a fighting art. Um, Tony Jaa has talked about his fighting that he took it um, like he wanted to represent Thai martial arts, but he's doing like not just Muay Thai, but he's doing like Muay Baran as well. And I think he's had some training in like either like Hapkido or some other Korean martial art. Just this is what about Michael Jai White? I think his name is he legit? Michael Jai White talks a lot of bullshit. Don't take anything coming out of Michael Jai White's mouth take with a grain of salt. He will tell you he's this big bad. dude. There was a fighter. There's no record of him fighting. I'm sorry, street fights don't count. I've been in a few fights on the street. That doesn't count because you can't there's no way to publicly verify street fights. That doesn't count. The only thing that can count is your your record as a in in competition. And he Michael Jai Wright has never fought in competition. John Claude Van Damme has fought in competition. He has an actual record as a full contact karate and kickboxer. Michael Jai White doesn't. And then he'll post videos of him sparring with MMA um, with MMA fighters and he'll say, this is him fighting so and so from the UFC. Sparring with someone is not a fight. That's so Michael Jai White is just full of shit. Uh, does he have legit skills? Yes, he's a legit karate guy, but it's obviously he spends more time bodybuilding than he does, being, you know, becoming an effective martial artist. Like most martial artists don't concentrate on developing their body like that. Like that's not necessary nor that's not necessary nor particularly useful for becoming an effective martial artist. An effective martial artist should have the body of a boxer, not that of a bodybuilder. So have you seen Kung Fu Hustle? Yeah, Kung Fu Hustle is a classic. Everyone's seen Kung Fu Hustle. Or should have. This is a classic. He has a sequel coming out to that, right? He's finally making a sequel after like what's been like 24 years, but he's working on a sequel to Kung Fu Hustle. The guy I can't remember his name. Melissa says, "LOL, yes, dude is like Shaolin soccer." Uh, oh, that guy, Jesus Image Church Africa. He's all right. He's just I don't know. He, but Melissa says he agreed. MJ White is a bit full of shit. I've seen him kick and strike hard, but still, yeah. I mean, it's easy to kick and punch hard on stationary targets, but again, he claims he was a fighter because he used to get into like street fights when he was younger. But again, you can't verify street fighting. Like that's you. And then the other thing is a person who actually has been in a lot of street fights. That just means they're not a person who knows how to get along with people. That doesn't mean they're someone you should actually train with. Like I've been in a few fights, but it's been a few, not a lot. Someone who's been in a lot of fights means they're just a disagreeable person. That doesn't mean that's someone you should train with. And again, there's no way to publicly verify street fights unless people has recorded them. Like if you want to get into like unprofessional fights that can be verifiable, you can go online and sign up for street beefs, and they'll put you in these little fights with other amateur fighters. Melissa says, "What's that style in the Middle East?" I think it's from Syria. I'm not sure, but like I said, there's every like every place has martial arts. So I don't know what Syria does. Um, there's martial arts in Africa. Like there's the Zulu fighting art. It deals with like staffs and swords, which is pretty cool. And I don't think there's an actual name for it. I think they just call it the Zulu. I think they just call it the Zulu martial art. Um, Native Americans have had martial arts styles. Um, and so again, that gets into other thing. That gets into what else I was saying earlier is that all these martial arts, every civilization and in every situation, martial arts has arose. But what what is lied to, these teachers try to act as if these martial arts arose as a way of fighting, um, to which is a way of these teachers promoting their art, saying, yeah, this art developed in such and such country as a way to fight and defend themselves in the military and all this sort of stuff. No, it didn't. Most of these martial arts mostly arose as a form as a sort of game. Savat Savat developed amongst a bunch of French sailors, which is why they fought with their shoes on, wearing boots. These people from Paris and from um, what's the other big French city? I forgot, but these Parisian sailors basically started this game, which became Savat or box La Boxe Française, um, the La Boxe Française, as a way of it was just it was a game. It was not meant to be like some military style to make you a badass. It was just a way of passing time amongst men who had a lot of testosterone than men do today, who rather wear purses and paint their fingernails. Controversial. uh, just a dude says I seen that Zulu stick fighting. Yeah, that's what's yep Zulu stick fighting. See, I don't know what it's called. That's pretty much all it's called. Just a dude. It's called just Zulu stick fighting or Zulu martial arts. It doesn't really have a name other than from where it came, Zulu. Like maybe the Zulu people themselves call it something else um, in their in the Zulu language, but to everyone else, it's just called Zulu stick fighting. But they also it's sort of like it's similar. I think a lot of people like it because it's similar to Filipino martial arts. It's called Zulu stick fighting, but there's also they also use a sword because just like in Filipino martial arts, what you do with the stick, you can also do with a stick or I mean with a knife or a sword. And in Filipino martial arts, what's so cool about it is it's learned differently than other martial arts. So in Filipino martial arts, you start out using weapons first. Like you start using sticks, and then you start using a stick with a dagger or a sword, and then a dagger and sword called the espada y daga. And then you learn, empty-handed style, and the empty hand techniques flow from the weapon, how you work, how you use the weapons. And so, because arnis is the national sport of the Philippines, every student has to learn arnis in high school and college. Like they have to take it for credit. You know, basically just like here in America, we have to take wrestling in middle school and high school. They have to take arnis in high school. But that's pretty much all the that's pretty much the extent of how much people know it because even though our niece is the national sport of the Philippines. The most popular martial art in the Philippines is actually Taekwondo, which is funny. It kind of makes sense because a lot of people love everything about Korean culture in the Philippines, so it kind of makes sense that they will love Taekwondo as their favorite martial art since they love Korean culture there in the Philippines. Like any like, there's gonna be more than likely any girl you date there is gonna like watching K dramas and listening to K-pop. So, um, so let's get into some more historical BS. So like I said, most martial arts not develop as some sort of like fighting style to be used for military men. Most of them developed as games, like Savate or wrestling here. American American freestyle folk wrestling developed mostly as a game, but it has become an effective. But the thing is, folk style American wrestling is actually a very effective martial art. Um, one of the biggest um, one of the biggest proponents of American wrestling was good old honest Abe. Abraham Lincoln was a wrestler, And from what I hear, he developed it what I think he created one of the wrestling moves in American wrestling. I don't think it was the body slam. I think it was the what's the one where you take the person uh and you the reverse slam when you what I forgot, but he create Abraham Lincoln developed a wrestling move. So something we don't know about. That's a good nugget to know since today is President's Day. Well, it was President's Day. It's 12. It's past 12 now, but February 17th for folks who don't know is President's Day. President's Day. So when I was a kid, it wasn't a President's Day. There used to be George Washington's birthday, and it used to be Lincoln's birthday. George Washington's birthday was on February 17th. So they combined both birthdays and made it just President's Day on George Washington's birthday, which was the 17th. For, for you guys who don't know that, I am a history nerd, by the way. So our President Lincoln was a wrestling champion when he was younger, and he developed a wrestling move to still practice in American folk wrestling. Like I said, it wasn't the body slam. I think it was the suplex. I think he did. Someone can fact check me if you can Google it. Um, go right on ahead. But I think Abraham Lincoln. I can't remember which technique he created, but it was either the. I think it was the suplex or something like that. I can't remember which one. Anyway, wrestling, folk wrestling, in many different cultures developed as a game, like it did here in America. Just like Savat developed, just like Savat in France, just like karate in Okinawa. These were not, again, to go back to what I said an hour ago. Karate was not developed as a as a as a art to fight against the samurai by a bunch of farmers who wouldn't have had time to do that. It was developed by a bunch of wealthy Okinawan noblemen who had the ability to travel and would have been able to take upon these elements that became Okinawan karate, which again came from the Fujian province of southern China. They mixed in with some of the stuff, some of the um, native wrestling techniques that the Okinawans did, and the elements that came from the Siamese kingdom of the time and from the Philippines, because at that time the Rikyu, the Rikyu, the Ryukyu kingdoms, the Ryukyu kingdom, which was all the islands of that became known collectively as Okinawa, were a trading hub for a lot of people in East Asia during that time. So karate developed as a game amongst these noblemen, not as a way of fighting against the tyranny of the samurai Japanese uh, imperial government. That's just a lie. Western boxing developed as a game, more than likely. So, but martial arts teachers and fighting coaches want to promote their arts and say, yeah, this developed as a way of fighting, as a means of self defense or as a means of militaries learning hand to hand combat. No, they didn't. Most martial arts didn't. Most martial arts developed as a game amongst men of leisure, or if not men of leisure, men who had time on their hands, like French sailors or, or noblemen in places, or in the case of in the New World, Black Americans, foundational Black Americans, developed their own martial art in the Carolinas of the 1700s and 1800s called knocking and kicking, which consisted of a of a game of using headbutts, punching and kicking. Um, in Brazil, so, I love how they say that. But yeah, in Brazil, capoeira was originally some martial arts techniques taken from Africa and practiced by the slaves of Brazil, and but it was taught as a dance because they weren't a, they weren't allowed to fight, so they practiced it as a dance. Again, like wushu during the Maoist, whatever you want to call it, because I'm not trying to be controversial, but during the time of Mao Zedong in China, in the communist uprising, uh, Chinese martial arts were outlawed. But because Mao himself loved Chinese martial arts, he commissioned the creation of wushu, which is a dance, which is a more of a dance type style of martial art. When you look at it, it's not meant to be fighting. Going back to Japan, let's go to Aikido. I don't care what Steven Seagal does in his movies. Aikido is not a fighting art. It was never meant to be by by its founder Morihei Ueshiba. Morihei Ueshiba took the elements of Aiki Jiu-Jitsu and turned it and took all the striking and the nasty stuff out of it and used it as a way to promote what he considered a spiritual martial art, similar to Tai Chi. Tai Chi was never meant to be a fighting art. It was, I can't say it was meant as a game, but it was probably just meant as a form of exercise. It was not meant to be some sort of uh, self defense. Oops, I forgot to change my filter here. So I probably missed a few chats here. Let me just scroll up really quick. I didn't miss much. Just scrolling, guys. Let's see about what I missed because I had my filter on. And yep, I've caught everything. Pause. But yeah, so Aikido was not this. What Steven Seagal does, he's mixed bits of like karate and with his Aikido because there's no striking in Aikido. Like you might like you might like slap or punch someone to offset them and um en route to like tossing them, but there's really no like striking and kicking in Aikido whatsoever. And also, the really circular way they throw people is not realistic. Like again, it's meant is it the founder Morihei Shiba himself never meant for Aikido to be an effective fighting art or self-defense. It was meant to be spiritual. Those sort of circular throws, like anyone who's done grappling know that's that's not realistic. And so people will get into this bullshit saying, well, oh, that's because they took this from the samurai who would have kept their distance while throwing someone because of their sword. No, that doesn't make sense. If someone had a sword, you would actually get closer to them because that makes the sword ineffective. You would get in in closest possible to them. So um so Aikido is I'm not gonna say Aikido is bullshit, but it's people who promote it as a fighting art or a self defense. They're lying to you, or they're or they're deceived themselves because Aikido is not effective as a fighting art and it wasn't developed to be. Those large circular throws are not effective. If anyone's ever practiced real grappling, if you've ever practiced judo or wrestling or um, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. You know, the circular stuff in Aikido is not effective. And it's not, they didn't keep their distance to avoid a sword because anyone who's ever rolled with someone using weapons knows that you actually want to get in close to someone when they have a weapon, not far away from them, where you can actually give them range to use the weapon. That doesn't make sense. Um, and again, I not criticize people talking about some of the habits of karate. Like the horse stance was not the whole idea. The horse stance was made to punch people from from a horse is just a lie. That's no, no, they didn't. Because you would keep one hand on the on the on the stirrups while the other one you punched. No, that's bullshit. Which goes into the whole thing that karatekas went around fighting samurai. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Um, or the other myth is that they developed jump kicks to kick people off their horses. Again, no, they didn't. They did not develop jump kicks to kick people off their horses. The Okinawan in Okinawan karate, there aren't any jump kicks because the jump kicks came from savat, which is a very acrobatic type of kicking style developed in Japan. Sorry, in France, and was blended in with karate to become modern karate. With um, with the Okinawan karate being brought over to mainland Japan, like Shotokan. In Shotokan karate, that's when you start seeing all these high kicks and spin kicks and jump kicks, because the son of the founder of Shotokan karate, Gichin Funakashi, studied Savat and added it to his interpretation of karate, which was then embraced by Japan because they saw it as an they saw it as an art to rival Western boxing. Almost as I broke my hamstring in karate school, then I quit. Sounds like you didn't go to a good place or you didn't stretch. That's again another problem. A lot of people in martial arts don't, in traditional martial arts, don't understand the importance of cross training. Again, in traditional Okinawan karate, they cross train because they understood the importance of strength and conditioning. They did kettlebell training. They ran. They knew the importance of that sort of stuff. In modern karate, you might see these out of shape people doing karate, which is part of the reason why karate looks like a joke to most people. You see this karate sensei who looks out of shape. He looks like the dude from Cobra Kai, the one with the little beard with with the little ponytail at the end of his beard, whatever his chin beard, tail, ponytail, whatever you call it. A lot of too many karate senseis look like that. So they're out of shape. I for one would never train. I don't trust training with a martial arts instructor who's out of shape. There's no effect. You're missing the whole reason why I'm doing this video, Omar. You saying what is the most effective fighting style? Can a boxer beat a kung fu fighter? You're missing all the point of this whole video, which is most martial arts history is bullshit. um, com- what what's the most effective is combat sports, because combat sports you're constantly pressure testing your techniques. In boxing, in kickboxing, in Muay Thai, in Lethwei, in Kun Kimmer, in Savat, um, in MMA, in shoot fighting, they're constantly pressure testing their their fighting skills through competition and sparring. That's where you want to go if you want to learn an effective fighting style. It's not one style versus another style. It's what is a combat sport and what isn't. If a martial art is also a combat sport, it's effective. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, uh, collegiate wrestling, um, these sorts of things. Kung Fu, Kung Fu is not itself a martial art. It's just a term that means learn skill. That's really what Kung Fu means. It just means learn skill. Doesn't mean that someone knows an effective martial art. Like I don't know why people in 2025 are still having all these hang like this is exactly why I'm doing videos like this. I would encourage people who have a lot of these questions to go into my channel where it says martial arts myths, and I have a bunch of these things that I'm talking about here. I'm just doing it all collectively today. Speaking of which, I'm not letting Brazilian Jiu Jitsu off the hook. So Brazilian Jiu Jitsu has a lot of marketing behind it, which is a lot of bullshit. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu did not develop from Jiu Jitsu itself. It developed from Judo, specifically Kodokan Judo, by its founder Jigoro Kano. Jigoro Kano is the founder of Judo. One of his students came to Brazil and taught the Gracie brothers, who then further refined what they were taught, um, and concentrated on the submission fighting and called it Gracie style jiu-jitsu, which was effective at the time. But the only reason it was so effective at the time was because they were competing with people who've never experienced that fighting art before. Sort of like karate in the 70s and early 80s. The only reason karate was so effective in America in the 70s and early 80s was because the people who learned it were fighting against people who've never encountered anyone who's ever done karate before. Now in the 21st century, most people are, even if they haven't trained in martial arts, they're aware of martial arts and how it looks and how it works. They're not going to be easily as they're not going to be as easy to beat up as it was 40 years ago by some karate black belt. Like nowadays, is you're more likely to get knocked out if you have a karate black belt. um, but like the the Gracie Jiu Jitsu, the Gracie brothers today would be no match for the current Brazilian Jiu Jitsu players today. Not whatsoever, because BJJ has continued to evolve where they had to fight against other people who do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, or whom do wrestling, or whom do uh, Russian I forgot the Russian style, whatever. And also, again, MMA is not unique. Um, MMA has its roots in uh, Japanese shoot fighting, and in Jeet Kune Do, which was developed by Bruce Lee. And it's not even the first, and it's not the first hybrid style. Karate was a hybrid style long before MMA, long before Jeet Kune Do, long before shoot fighting. And the very first hybrid style goes all the way back to ancient Greece with Pancration, which I mentioned an hour ago as well. Pancration was a blending of Greek wrestling and boxing, and was practiced in the Athenian Olympics of the time. It was the first known hybrid fighting style. So MMA was not the first to do that. Almost as I remember in high school, I saw this little white girl beat the shit out of four guys. I don't know her style. I can't verify that, so I don't know. All I'll say is, again, if someone wants to learn an effective, if someone wants to learn um, self defense, you take a combat sport. Most traditional martial arts are not taught as combat sports. Combat sports are what are effective. So kickboxing, boxing, wrestling, BJJ, Muay Thai, Sanda, Savat, Lethway, Kunkimmer, shoot fighting. I don't know if they still practice shoot fighting, but if so, combat sports are pressure tested. This is the key element for an effective fighting style, is that it's pressure tested. Pressure tested means they're constantly competing and sparring with each other. It keeps them honest. A lot of these traditional martial arts could have been effective styles if applied through if they applied the techniques with pressure testing. And actually, that has started to happen. There has been traditional martial arts that have are starting to become more effective now because of pressure testing. So we've seen um, people bringing in elements from karate and taekwondo into MMA and making it effective because they're actually pressure testing these techniques through sparring and competition. So that's so when you look at what's an effective martial art, just think, well, do they compete? That's all you need to know. If they don't compete, it's probably not an effective fighting style. I don't care what the marketing is. I don't care if they told you hundreds of thousands of Israeli Mossad intel agents and Israeli Defense Forces practice Krav Maga. It's a bullshit style. They don't compete. They don't spar. They do a bunch of stylistic drilling, a bunch of drills. Drills aren't pressure testing each other. You're not actually working it against someone who's actively trying to stop you from doing it and hurt you, as in sparring and competition. That's why Krav Maga is bullshit. It's not pressure tested. Almost as who is better. Why do you keep asking these goofy questions? Who is better, Bruce Lee or Chuck Norris? Bruce Lee did not compete. He was not a competitor. He taught martial arts. He was not a. You must be from overseas, because yeah, these are goofy questions. Chuck Norris was a world champion karate champion. He he was a world champion in karate tournaments. He was taught by Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee, how you know? So how we know that what Bruce Lee taught is effective is because he taught top level fighters who actually competed. He taught Chuck Norris. He taught Joe Louis, not the black Joe Louis, the white Joe Louis. Joe Louis is actually the founder of American kickboxing, and he developed American kickboxing from taking um, karate because he was first a full contact karate champion, and he disliked how he disliked um, the setup of karate tournaments, and took elements of boxing and the stuff that he was taught by Bruce Lee, and that became American kickboxing. Um, and then Bruce Lee also taught Mike Stone, so he taught three world karate champions. This is evidence that what Bruce taught actually works. Is that he taught people who are really good at what they did and made them better. But Bruce himself never fought, other than he did a high. The only time, the only records we know of him fighting are two accounts. One was he fought in a Golden Gloves championship in his high school doing boxing, but that's in high school. That was not pro nor even semi-pro. It was a high school competition, and he got into a fight with a kung fu master in San Francisco back in the 60s. But we still don't really know what actually happened because there's so many different accounts of what happened. Some people say Bruce won. Some people said they fought to a draw. Others said the Wong Jack man beat him. We don't know what actually happened. Most of the people from Bruce's side of the story say that Bruce won, but it's still not known exactly what happened. Some people claim that he he hit the man a few times, and then he ran around chasing him around the gym until he caught up with him and he gave up. Others said it was like a brutal like fight, and Bruce was mad because it took too long. Again, others said they fought each other to a draw. Then other accounts say that Wong Jackman beat him. We don't know, but those are the only two accounts of Bruce fighting. And then we have some footage of him. Then we have some footage of him sparring with Dan Inosanto at um, the Ed Parker karate tournament long time ago. So We have some footage of him sparring Dan and Nasanto at a tournament, and we have two accounts of him fighting once. One fighting a kung fu master named Long Jack Man, um, and the other him doing a Golden Gloves match in high school. So it's but Norris was a student of his, so to say who is better, it doesn't really make sense because you can't compare. It doesn't make sense to compare a fighter versus a non-fighter. It's like comparing. It's like saying who's better, Sylvester Stallone or um, who is like who's a better fighter, Sylvester Stallone or Mike Tyson. Like one is a one is an actor, one is a actual fighter. Like it's it doesn't make sense to compare them. But in any case, I think I'm coming to the end of all these martial arts history, and just to reiterate, because I've talked about this in my discussion on pseudoscience and on um, sort of like the paranormal, but chi energy is not real. That's bullshit. From what I've seen with some people talk about in the Okinawan masters, the birthplace of karate, like Jesse, um, like the karate nerd says, Jesse, what's his name? Jesse, I forgot, but he has a great YouTube channel for people who love any and all things about karate and want to know more about the history of karate. So, according to him, a lot of the Okinawan masters, when they talked about ki energy or chi energy, it's known as ki in Japan and Korea and chi in China, and known as prana in India. They're all the same thing, some sort of vitalism energy. A lot of those guys, when they talk about ki energy, they meant ki energy basically as just a way of talking about mecha- mechanical energy, just the energy of motion when you're doing athletics. They didn't mean it to be like this invisible life force that gives rise to health and being able to float, throw energy balls, and all. That's all BS. Which goes back to what I said earlier about internal versus external kung fu. The difference between internal and external kung fu wasn't that one was merely about physicality, which is external, and internal is merely about chi energy. That's just BS. Internal versus external styles. Basically, the internal styles were mostly grappling styles in China, and they tended to be older than the external kung fu, the striking and stuff, which may have been brought over from other countries, which also gets into the whole myth that Shaolin Kung Fu came from an Indian Buddhist monk that brought over these exercises to the Shaolin temple to teach them so they wouldn't fall asleep doing their meditative exercises. That's just BS. Because again, Chinese martial arts existed before Shaolin. Um, and I doubt there was even a guy named Bodhidharma that came over to China. He could be real. I don't know. I I find it doubtful. Which so here's another one. Wing Chun Kung Fu was supposedly was developed by a female Shaolin nun. That's bullshit. Like there's no historical evidence that there was a actual Shaolin nun who developed Wing Chun Kung Fu who taught it to her student. There's no evidence of that. Um, what is true of Wing Chun martial arts, I mean Wing Chun Kung Fu, is that it was developed to be close quarters fighting. It was developed to fight in really close proximity to someone. But that doesn't. But beyond that, the whole myth it was developed by a Shaolin nun, and that's the reason why they prefer these punches to the body. That's no. That is the myth, but it's not. It's BS. Also, and talking about Wing Chun, um, I know everyone loves those movies with what's his name playing the Grandmaster Ip Man. I'm sorry, Ip Man was barely 100 pounds, and he was not out there going around beating up people. He was, from what I understand, he was probably at some point a Chinese aristocrat before the takeover, but um, he was an extremely he was a pretty small man, and he never directly taught Bruce Lee because one, simply because of racism. Bruce being having part European ancestry, he was considered mixed, and they some of Ip Man's top students would have thought it would have been disrespectful to have him directly teach Bruce. So Ip Man had his top student his top students teach Bruce. He wasn't directly responsible for his tutelage. And again, Ip Man was not going around kicking ass all over China like you see in those movies. Those movies are pretty fun, but come on. And then what, Ip Man too, when he's fighting Mike Tyson, come on. If Mike hit if Mike hit someone like that, they would be they would be unalived. Come on. I'm not in, I'm not even talking about the historical Ip Man. I'm talking about even the strong version of Ip Man played in the movies would have got folded over with one of those punches by Mike Tyson. That's just such BS. It's fun to watch though. The Ip Man movies were fun to watch, but completely historically inaccurate. But you have all these Wing Chun nerds like, oh yeah, Wing Chun is effective. You see the movies with Ip Man? That's how effective Wing Chun is. No, it's not. Wing Chun is a joke. And I say this as someone who practiced it because since I have a lineage in Jeet Kune Do, we all learned a little bit of Wing Chun. Wing Chun is one of the base arts that in Jeet Kune Do. And I can tell you, Jeet Kune Do is not effective. Actually, people in Wing Chun, sorry. So even people who practice Wing Chun Kung Fu, if they're honest with you, if they're actually honest with you, they will tell you this is not an effective fighting style. That if you want to make Wing Chun effective, you need to learn like boxing or MMA to make Wing Chun effective because by itself, it's not an effective style. It's not. And the myth that it was developed by some Shaolin nun is just this is bull. That's it's no, it's phony. Sorry, that's just not true. Muay Thai has some myths around that. So because Muay Thai has become so popular and it's the national sport of Thailand, all these other countries in Southeast Asia are trying to claim that they were the that Muay Thai was founded in their country. So you have people in Cambodia claiming that Muay Thai was actually a part of Cambodia, that it's the same thing as Kun Kimmer, and they tried to combine the sports together. And whoever is the governing body of Muay Thai in Thailand said, "Oh, absolutely, hell to the no." We are separate from you guys, and it's obvious too because Kun Kimmer, although very similar to Muay Thai, has differences. There's not as much clenching done, and clenching is not a it's not clenching is like the clenching is one of the most important aspects of Muay Thai. Um, clinch the clinch work in Muay Thai is stand up grappling basically, whereas in other kickboxing styles they don't allow clinch work, which is why Muay Thai is not kickboxing because of the clinch work. In Kun Kimmer, you're not allowed to clinch for that long, and there's more of a emphasis on fancier kicking. whereas in Muay Thai they try to keep it simple and effective. Um, so there one um, in Burma, aka Myanmar, they also try to claim that Muay Thai came from Burmese boxing Lethwei, and claimed that during the era of the Siamese kingdoms that there was a Thai warrior who took Burmese boxing and developed, basically developed it into Muay Thai. But he was studying Burmese boxing. We have no way to verify that. So as far as we know, Muay Thai started in Thailand. Yes, the Siamese kingdom did embody many parts of Indochina at the time, but that doesn't mean that Thai boxing itself came from these other areas of Indochina that became different countries separate from Thailand. Also, left the kickboxing style, or the boxing style of Burma called Lethwei, is practiced quite differently than in Muay Thai. Muay Thai is way more t- Muay Thai is is a little bit, well, I don't want to say it's more effective, but it's um I don't know, it's more savvy than Lethwei. Lethwei plus in Lethwei you can do headbutts. You are not allowed to headbutt people in Muay Thai. And in Lethwei they often practice bare knuckle fighting. There is bare knuckle fighting in Muay Thai, but that's not common. Muay Thai takes the rules of Western boxing with the gloves, all that sort of stuff, and made it, which is what makes it the modern national sport that it is. Whereas Lethwei still, you can practice it bare knuckle, but usually when you see bare knuckle fights in Muay Thai, it's more of a demonstration than an actual like professional fight. I mean, they are well. How should I say They are professional fights, but they're not common. Like you don't if you want to fight, if you want to do Muay Thai Thailand, you're not expected to do bare knuckle fighting. In Lethwei, you might be expected to do bare knuckle fighting, and you have to prepare for headbutts. You're not getting headbutted in Muay Thai. That will you'll get disqualified just like headbutts or elbows in Western boxing. But anyway, guys, I'm about to end this. This is late for me, but I just wanted to go through all those sorts of historical details. And again, unfortunately, there's a lot of myths propagated in martial arts, usually by teachers, either purposefully to market to promote their martial arts, or done because they're ignorant and don't know any better themselves. They were taught these lies themselves. Like like in karate, a lot of these people talk a lot of bullshit because they were taught these things themselves, so they don't know any better. Like the whole thing. So here's another one: the whole idea of bunkai. So the whole idea of bunkai in karate is to take katas and to interpret what the original techniques in that kata were. Um, katas are bullshit. Like katas were so nowadays, I mean, so in traditional martial arts, the forms or the fighting forms or katas are practiced usually so that you can get to the next the next belt. But katas were supposed to be a way of rehearsing your techniques that you already learned. That was the original purpose of katas. It was a way of practicing of rehearsing techniques you already learned. It was not supposed to be something you learned aside from the techniques that you were learning, which is how it's done now. And so now, because people are practicing katas aside from the original purpose of just rehearsing their techniques, they have to do something called bunkai, which is to interpret the original meaning of those katas, which is just stupid. It's a waste of time. Practicing a kata is not going to make you an effective martial art. a martial artist in for fighting or self defense. Um, too many of these traditional martial arts practice a bunch of stuff that has no point in fighting whatsoever. Doing that all that iron hand training is a waste of fucking time. Like it's a waste of time. Sitting there doing a bunch of meditation, waste of time. How's that going to help you fight? Um, the katas, waste of time. Again, the kata's original purpose was just to rehearse techniques that you have already learned. It wasn't to. It wasn't supposed to be for the historic. It wasn't supposed to be for a historical preservation of techniques that no one now knows what they were meant to do. So now they have to do bunkai to interpret the katas. Like that's usually a part of uh, a person practicing karate's um, test for like their black belt or whatever, or second degree for their, I don't know if it's for that black belt, but at least for like their second degree black belt and third degree black belt, they often have to do bunkai to interpret these old katas and show how they can be interpreted for showing what they were doing in the katas actually meant. So like they do a certain move, they're supposed to interpret that to say, oh, well, what that meant was to show that they were grabbing a person, then they elbowed them, and no, no, it's BS. This is why Bruce Lee himself hated katas. He thought it was like trying to learn how to swim on land. But anyway, guys, I think I've talked to you guys enough about this. If anyone else wants to know more about this, including you, Omar, or anyone else, or people watching this on replay, go ahead and leave a comment. Say, let me know if you want me to continue doing some more of this. I can continue more history. I can't. It's simply too much stuff to think of at one time. But I think I went through a lot of them. But if there's something that I haven't brought up, go ahead and drop it in the comments, and I'll get to it. If I don't know about it, I'm gonna look into it myself and try to suss it out. But but to reiterate, a lot of martial arts history is bullshit. Often meant to promote a martial art. And again, early, a lot of these traditional arts started off as fighting games, not as means of self-defense, and not as means of a military learning hand-to-hand combat techniques. That came after the fact, if at all. Um, so that's it, pretty much. But if anyone has any specific questions, go ahead and drop it. And if you guys want to support me, go ahead and sign up for memberships. I have memberships available. I have members only content that you can see if you're a member, or you can send me a super thanks. You'll see that on your screen. Uh, or if you want, you can go to the links in my description and drop me a Cash App or buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. And if you don't have any money, so you can't do that, just give me a like and a subscribe, and that would be great. If you can give me a like and a subscribe, and even better if you can share the video with other people. That's all you gotta do. That's free, completely free. You don't have to. That doesn't cost you a dime. So, thank you guys. And if you got any more martial arts questions, let me know. I will have more martial arts content coming up of me training as well. And I might even put up, if I can get that footage from my cousin, me fighting these karate idiots. And they don't know how to spar, and it just shows. But we'll see. If I do that, that might be a members only video. We'll see. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it.